Keep Yourself Clean is a museum by the art collective Volna. It contains 7 works exploring light and darkness. It also doesn't really exist. Each of these installations exist, scattered across Europe in bars and abandoned factories, but these recreations aren't real. Keep Yourself Clean is an entirely virtual museum, modeled and programmed and built in a digital environment. It is surprisingly accurate to real life, but it is also an imitation. This display may have the exact same lighting and proportions, but the physics that govern light here aren't the same as in the real world. These textures are carefully modeled after their real counterparts, but they don't have the same temperature or weight. I don't think you can say these are just the same as the real installations. So what's the point then? Is this virtual museum a way of sharing the art? Is it a pale shadow of the real thing? Or is it something new entirely? I don't know. All I can tell you is that I had an emotional reaction to this imaginary museum, and it was far from the only one. Digital museums are having a bit of a moment. During COVID, numerous museums, from the Louvre to the Guggenheim, made virtual tours, allowing you to peruse fine art from the comfort of your own home. Or at least, try to. But to me, these recreations are an inevitably futile effort. They can't hope to capture the feeling of the real museum, the vibe, the scale, the history. Staring at a PNG of the Mona Lisa just isn't the same. Far more interesting to me are museums that embrace their digital nature. Museums that do not or cannot exist in the real world. Over the past month, I have explored virtual museums, from the grounded to the surreal, the cozy to the alienating. It has been inspiring, challenging, and honestly pretty overwhelming, so I've curated them. Attempting to arbitrarily categorize works as strange as these is a bit of a silly effort, I know. But the museum experience is defined by curation, by how works are compared and contrasted. These categories are just a macro level of that. I acknowledge my limits and encourage you to explore these spaces yourself. The vast majority of them are free, and I've put a doc in the description with links to all of them. And with all this in mind, I invite you to our first exhibit. Art has a tendency to be about its own format. It's just natural. Books about books, movies about movies, digital museums about digital history. Museums about games are the most obvious example here. The Museum of Screens preserves browser games that are often taken offline without warning. It's unique in its relative lack of curation. While games must be at least 10 years old, free, and browser playable, there are no barriers of quality or popularity. It's a freewheeling approach that, in a physical space, would be simply impossible. No museum can take in everything. But here, the museum is allowed to mimic the breezy, surprising nature of the Flash games it preserves. The Museum of Lockpicking lets users engage with lockpicking mechanics from a wide variety of games and genres, something a real museum probably wouldn't want to encourage its visitors to do. VR3 is a collection of water textures, from the cartoonish to the photoreal. The Game Boy Camera Gallery is a collection of, Game Boy camera photos, with information on the surprisingly complicated tech behind the hardware. Others contrast the serenity of the museum experience with the crude violence of many early games. Arstoom puts players into a Doom 2 recreation of the Bruckner House, allowing them to destroy the artists and artworks at will. It makes the violence of curation explicit, where choosing who is displayed and who isn't is turned into shooting them in the face. Museum Meltdown used the real-life Arkin Museum of Modern Art as a set piece for a Duke Nukem 3D level, the violence a shocking and operatic contrast to the fine art on the walls. It is perhaps ironic that these museum shooters, so focused on the destruction of the old, are themselves almost impossible to find, having been lost to the early internet. All of these museums are about the digital, but they also have focus. They're about something. The Museum of All Things, or MOAT, is about, The moat is not infinite, but it may as well be. It's a collection of every single Wikipedia page, grouped into wings by general field. Venturing into culture can generate an exhibit on abstract art, which opens up passages into Rothko in New York, which opens up more passages, and deeper and deeper. It's basically Borges's Library of Babel, just with a little more Danny DeVito. The moat is, at its core, just a fancy version of Wikipedia, and it's easy to fall into hours-long distractions the way you would on the real thing. But it is also unsettling in a way a web page isn't. Wikipedia is designed to be navigated. It has a search bar. You can find what you're looking for. The moat does not care. You wander, you get lost. You find yourself in an exhibit about the deep sea with no clear memory of how you arrived and no clear path back. You can return to the lobby at any time through the pause menu, but doing so feels like an admission of defeat, like you've left a part of yourself behind. There is nothing in here that will jump out and scare you. Well, almost nothing. But Wikipedia doesn't have endless liminal hallways or rooms that open into other rooms in impossible configurations, like an encyclopedic house of leaves. It's a museum that calls attention to the infinite nature of our digital world, rabbit hole after rabbit hole after rabbit hole. We know so much, and lost in these halls, it's easy to conclude that we know too much. We need to leave. The most common kind of imaginary museum is the practical. Museums that could exist, but would be too expensive, too niche, or too conceptually strange to exist in the real world. IC Contemporary is a Toronto-based collective that uses digital exhibits to highlight emerging artists. Their spaces are realistic, full of the soft lighting, wooden floors, and informational placards you'd expect. The virtual format is simply the most practical way to get eyes on these artists. Others use the digital space as a collaborative tool. The Crows Community Museum is, on one level, kind of a shitpost. It's a chaotic collection of work by members of a Discord trying their hand at 3D modeling. But it's also genuinely charming. It's a space where people get to make something and have it sit alongside other things, seen by other people, in a context that treats it as inherently worthy. A real museum would never host this. This one does. Some museums examine exactly what practical limits they're breaking. Limits and Demonstrations is a small exhibit within Kentucky Route Zero. It contains 6 works that were nearly impossible to install when they originally debuted. They were too tall, too complex, too energy intensive, so they ended up here. It's a bit of a joke. These installations are finally free of their constraints, able to be displayed in their full glory. But they are, after all, entirely digital. The constraints were self-constructed to begin with. Within Kentucky Route Zero's 2.5 gigabytes, they could always be as big as they wanted. You move through the exhibit with your friends. You'll talk a little bit about its strange history. Mostly, though, you just fill the space with words. There's a couple ways you can choose to react to the exhibit, but mostly there's a sense of confusion and the vague discomfort of not really getting it. These works are here, finally fully displayable, but whether it's due to the limits of curation or the limits of a digital format, you still can't quite grasp them. At the end, you can leave by saying the museum was exhausting. It is a profoundly unfulfilling experience. It is also a magnificent demonstration of our limits. Hey, wait a minute. But the grandest of these practical wonders are the Zeums. The team behind the Zeums offer 2 definitions for the word. 1, a virtual gallery game, composed of eclectic and wonderful things. 2, kind of like a Zine, but the museum video game version. Since 2017, the team has collected works from hundreds of artists, placing them in galleries and gardens. They are, kinda, what you would expect from a museum. Informational placards, slightly confusing maps, even an excellent audio tour. You peruse a gallery of sculptures, seeing how artists work within constraints, create small objects that express something precise and considered. Then, you turn a corner and are thrust into a room of exploding color, or a dog playing the piano, or a massive face. The Zeums, in both definition and content, are a mix of the considered and the impossible. The largest of them is the Zeum Exposition. It's a massive brutalish structure set into the side of a mountain, accompanied by an impossibly tall tower and gondola ride up. And once inside, certain exhibits offer a chance to peer into another little world, sometimes no bigger than a hallway, sometimes spanning a whole city. There is boundless invention, impractical invention. Yet, it is also intimate. Exhibits are small, personal, placed carefully in ways that contrast and enhance what surrounds them. Like in my favorite real museums, there is a sense that this place goes on forever, that there is always another corner, another room, another world to fall into. And then, a quiet sadness when you realize you've seen it all. In the first Zeum, tucked into a corner, there's a memorial to the modules used to construct the space. It's, again, a little bit of an in-joke, but it's also a reminder that while this is a game, and the walls and floors are nothing but pixels, people chose to build this place, and people worked to fill it with art. The museum is real, and the museum is imaginary. You're invited, no matter what. Some museums are not quiet. Some are angry. Some should be. Many virtual museums choose to highlight art that is imaginary for a very obvious reason. The art was stolen. The Museum of Stolen Art features pieces reported missing in the FBI and Interpol art crime databases. Another exhibit by the same name showcases works destroyed or stolen during the Russian occupation of Mariupol, including not just fine art, but architecture and monuments that are now rubble. Last year, UNESCO published the Museum of Stolen Cultural Objects, a massive database on illicitly trafficked artifacts. And finally, the Stolen Art Gallery is an inversion of all of these, displaying not the objects themselves, but the empty rooms their theft leaves behind. These museums are not all the same kind of angry. The UNESCO database is academic, while the Mariupol exhibit is much more raw in its grief. But they share a subject: absence. Of course, many stolen objects aren't being illicitly trafficked. They're being displayed proudly in other museums. Relooted, released earlier this year, doesn't quite fit with the rest of this video. Partly because it's more of a game with puzzles, parkour, and actual mechanics, and partly because it involves breaking into museums. In the world of Relooted, governments have agreed to return publicly displayed objects to their home countries. So museums have shifted them into private collections, hoarding them out of sight. You play as a small team that steals back 70 real-world African artifacts currently held in Western collections. The game is an impressively nuanced take on repatriation. It is true that many of these museums, even if they acquired their artifacts through bloodshed and theft, preserved what they took, and we only have these objects today because of that. It is also true that their refusal to return them now is more stubbornness than any genuine desire to protect the art. Relooted never pretends that these heists are legal, but it also never assumes that legality equals morality. The game offers a simple solution to stolen artifacts, and an optimistic vision of the future, where change is possible and justice can be grabbed and run with. It's not necessarily a realistic solution, but then again, when has realism mattered in this video? Well, about that. Monuments to Guilt is perhaps the most realistic museum in this video. It's, a couple of rooms, a couple of paragraphs, some OSHA-approved cabling? And yet, it too is imaginary. Monuments to Guilt exhibits real examples of exclusionary architecture. Benches designed to prevent unhoused people or teenagers or really anyone from being able to sit on them. It exists as a digital museum for a couple of reasons. First, it is highly unlikely that the owners of these benches would ever allow them to be relocated or recreated in such an exhibit. Second, there's the perspective. The entire game is played with a white barrier across the top and bottom of the screen. It's so much usable space, blocked out for no good reason. Kind of like the benches. And beyond distributing some really odd goggles to people as they entered the exhibit, this is not a practical effect for a museum to do. And yet, I don't think Monuments to Guilt would work if it wasn't a museum. In fact, I know it wouldn't. Monuments to Guilt has a website version, and while it's nice and important to have for accessibility, it doesn't hit the same as these cold rooms. Maybe it's the loneliness, the fact that you are forced to sit, or, well, stand, in this closed application with no distractions. Maybe it's the perspective, with nothing but a harsh void and even harsher benches. Or maybe it's the museum itself. The fact that an institution we associate with history and learning is instead a monument to our failures. This museum could exist in reality, a better reality, one where we learn from our guilt and are willing to sit with it. Maybe it does exist in that world, but not in this one. Museum implies preservation, that something has been fossilized, frozen, encased in amber, and now waits patiently for your hungry eyes. But this is a mistake. A museum is not a morgue. It is a house. And when a house is both hungry and awake, every room becomes a mouth. These Monsters is a museum of these monsters. It displays them on placards and information screens for you to gaze on and laugh. You should not laugh. You are too loud. But these monsters is in the past. It is delisted, almost completely erased, remembered only in a few videos and articles. There are other hungry rooms to visit. The Museum of Mediocre Appropriations kicks you out after 5 minutes. No refunds. The neo-brutalism of tomorrow is a museum with no artifacts, no lights, no placards. What is on display here? The walls, the empty space, you. I hope you like it here. You'll be moving in soon. The Museum of Dwellings, located within Kentucky Route Zero, is a museum of houses. It wasn't always that way. It used to be a neighborhood. Eventually, due to economic decline or natural disasters, the community was converted into a museum. The livelihood of people turned into an exhibit to gawk at. The inhabitants were allowed to remain, and almost all did. But this wasn't a kindness. After all, every museum needs interactive exhibits. The inhabitants are suspicious of the museum staff and their job offers that mysteriously fall through. By night, a boy and his eagle fly the neighbors and their houses out to the forest so they can get a good night's sleep. It is not a homely place. Yet one visitor recognizes a home on display. He can go up into the attic and down into the basement, a basement that doesn't exist, and swim in its impossible lake. But he doesn't stay. It's not his home anymore. This isn't your home either. It's time for you to go. Digital environments lend themselves naturally to the surreal. Games are weird enough that making them weird on purpose is an easy next step. Just look at how evocative the Beginner's Guide or the works of Cosmo D are. When it comes to museums, though, the surreal can be a curse. Veer too far away from museum aesthetics, and you lose the benefit of that emotional connection. We know how to react when we see a framed painting. We don't know how to react to the Museum of the Saved Image is, to say the least, a lot. It's a collection of one person's saved images, dumped in here while they were cleaning up their desktop. It's about what you'd expect, a lot of memes and in-jokes that I will never understand. But there are also saved messages between friends, messages I feel like shouldn't be seen. All museums are curated, and the creator put these images here. They could have easily left them out, and I would have been none the wiser. So did they want to put these personal moments on display, or were they just sticking to the bit? That question of intent, that question that only exists in a place like this, sits in my gut long after I leave. Secret Habitat seems to forgo intent at all. It's an endless sprawl of procedurally generated buildings with procedurally generated art by procedurally generated artists. It could be just a mess of randomness, but there are decisions here, creative and recognizable decisions. The organization of the exhibits, the weird movement controls, the sickly pink landscape. Wandering Secret Habitat is flitting constantly between the real and the surreal, the alien and the human. Not all of these museums are trying to be random, though. Some find the surreal in reality. The Shape of Time is much more straightforward than the previous two museums. It is trying something no less bizarre. Time, in case you don't know, tends to move forward. When you move your hand's presence in that space, that physical memory of it, is left in the past. What this museum supposes is, what if it didn't? Scattered throughout the building are little physical memories of a dancer, a thumb, a tennis player. Their movements are tracked through space, the shape of time spreading out in front of you and then resetting. The exhibit could only exist virtually, partly because of the scale, the technology, the very nice fountains, but also because time simply doesn't move this way, leaving patterns of itself, stacking and disappearing at the click of a button. We live in a forward-moving reality. Only here can we escape it. All of the museums I've talked about in this video are surreal to some level. I'm not saying that this is an everyday occurrence, but these three feel more unknowable, ungraspable. They are surreal not just because they can be, but because they could never be anything else. I started this video wondering what the point of an imaginary museum is, but I don't think that's the right question. These spaces aren't interested in asking it. What they ask instead is what the point of any museum is. Is it preservation, to safely hold what we've somehow decided is important? Is it a way to escape the world just for a few hours? Or maybe it's a way to shine an even harder light on it. Maybe the museum itself is an exploitative structure. Maybe it's nothing at all. When I was in high school, I volunteered as a docent at a small local museum. And small is an understatement. It was one room about the early years of nearby college. We didn't get many visitors, and I'll be honest, I was mostly there so I could get volunteer hours while playing Slay the Spire. But every now and then, someone would come in genuinely curious. We'd talk, I'd tell them the admittedly little I knew, and I'd feel, briefly, like these four walls were deeper than I thought. And maybe that's the point. Not preservation or escape or any other number of, frankly, quite arbitrary categories. The point is just a moment where something clicks. None of these virtual museums made me feel the way I feel in the MoMA or the Art Institute of Chicago. I don't think they can, but they each made me feel something small and specific and intensely personal. These museums cannot be real. What they can do is show you something true. That's a different kind of experience. Smaller, maybe, more intimate, but that feeling is real. I remember that feeling from way back then. I'm glad I got to feel it again.